Proud people of the Empire State. From the financial and entertainment epicenter of New York City to the sleeping and empty small cities and towns of upstate, which once bustled with manufacturing, mining, and farming. We all know from inspiration, history, and nature, we deserve a return to the success and growth of generations past, a birthright being squandered by corruption in Albany, and the depredations of an insecure, scheming mountebank posing as governor, who loathes both us and himself. As liberty beckoned to enslaved peoples behind the Iron Curtain via American broadcasts after World War II, we now say, believe, rise, and join us. Welcome to Radio Free New York.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and we are here in the WYSL studios, and I've got Bob Savage here as usual.
Ahoy, mateys.
So this weather thing doesn't seem to be stopping any. It sounds like single digits are coming up here. So
this is what everybody says this time of year every year. Yeah, because that's why March is the cruelest month, because we get little glimpses of warmer weather and we start to think, oh, it's over. And no, it's not.
Yeah, just like a little glimpse of hope here. And then it just gets taken right away.
It's amazing we're not bitter.
Yeah, absolutely. So today I think we're going to talk a little bit about some social media, because I've been having a lot of fun with social media. And I'm not going to be talking about social media in the terms of this is how I make your social media better. No, I'm going to talk about social media in terms of just some stuff that's come up that it's a social topic. So we're going to talk about it. The first thing is the idea of our roads and just how terrible our roads are.
They're the worst.
Our roads are just really, really bad.
I mean, 390. You know, 390 from, I take it frequently from Rochester down here to the radio station down to exit 9, and it's like a Bosnian highway.
It's awful. And to put it in perspective, I drive a lot, and I do have Bluetooth in my car for anybody who's concerned about what I'm going to say. But I end up on the phone a lot while I'm driving, having conversations, meetings even, from point A to point B, perfectly legal, using Bluetooth, the whole everything. And many times I will talk with my wife between appointments, and she'll be like, "What's that noise? What is that?" And it's all the potholes and cracks and divots and bumps in the road that's just making the car go thud, 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 dum, boom, constantly. And it's just, that's how bad it is. That interrupts a cell phone conversation.
I think Andy Cuomo's getting paid by dentists because, the roads around here shake the fillings out of your teeth.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I made a joke, actually, about the roads like a year ago, and clearly it went way over everybody's head, because I was like, yeah, the roads in New York are so bad that even my MP3 player skips. And
waka, waka.
Yeah, and basically what happened is I got a bunch of, and being a tech guy, I should have anticipated this, a bunch of people explaining to me that MP3 players can't skip.
They can't skip.
Yeah, so
it's a joke.
Yep. So what I did post, though, is as a libertarian, I often hear people complain about if we were to change our tax structure, that there would be no roads. That is the number one most common thing that I hear is, if we don't tax the crap out of everybody, who will build the roads? So what I did is I posted an image on Facebook that kind of depicts how people think about this. And I did it because, I heard somebody say something a little while ago, and I wish I could remember who said it, because it really spoke to me. And they said, when you show up to something and you challenge what somebody's reality is, you then give them the opportunity to start thinking about what could be possible. And that doesn't necessarily mean that you're right. That doesn't mean that they're right either. But when you challenge somebody's reality, they now have the opportunity to see what reality could be. So I made this post on Facebook, and it was a picture of a car and kind of like a car manual. And I'm actually going to pull up the picture here so I can read for you guys exactly what it was, because some people, it actually sparked for them. They're like, yeah, absolutely. I'm starting to think about this. And other people just got angry about it, which was awesome. And then some people are kind of on the fence. I think some new people have started listening to what I talk about and seeing my posts, and they're trying to figure out if what I say makes sense or if I'm just, from the loony bin. They're trying to figure it out. So what it says, it's got a picture of a car here. It says, one of the most complex machines in human history, built by hundreds of companies for every conceivable purpose, easy to repair in your home garage. Now, as you guys may be thinking right now, and some people so generously point this out on Facebook, that nowadays you can't always repair them in your home garage. That was not the point. The point is to get you to think about the next part, where it then shows a picture of a strip of asphalt and says, a flat thing. Far too complicated for anyone to try constructing without the magic of government. Now, that's so what that does is that starts to challenge the idea of, we have way more complex things than our roads. They're full of potholes and very poorly taken care of. Why is it that as society, as Americans, as people of New York, why is it that we trust that only government can handle this, that only government can repair it, when clearly we have much more complex things that private companies are doing, even personal individuals are doing, maintaining, taking care of successfully? Why is it that we think that only government can do this, and yet they're doing such a terrible job, we're not looking for alternatives? So that, of course, got some very spirited debate going online. And I want to share this with you guys as listeners, viewers, people on the radio, people on the internet here. This idea that, let's challenge these realities, because clearly government is not doing a good job. They are not doing a good job.
They don't do a good job on anything, truth be told.
No, I mean,
there's no accountability.
Yeah, no, absolutely. There's very little accountability, sometimes none. They do a very, very poor job. And some people brought up some counters to this that I think are actually valid counters to discuss and talk about. One guy said, listen, there's more to roads than just building them. There's right of way. There's all these other things. And I would say, that's a valid point. I'm not talking about necessarily new roads, though. I'm talking about, the existing ones we have today. I'm not talking about, engaging with a person to purchase their property so we can build a fresh new road. I'm talking about the idea that we have existing infrastructure that's crumbling, and we allow government to be the middleman between us and the construction company. And it's just not working. It's just not working at all. And maybe there's a way that government could be the middleman and it could work, but clearly in New York, that's not happening. So I pose this to you guys to think about, what are the alternatives? Could it be something like infrastructure projects? There's this idea that they go to a bidding process, and that our legislatures, usually our executives, choose the lowest bidder, or it goes to open bid. I would challenge that process and say, instead, why don't we move to a process where these open bids are submitted to the public, and then you have a town hearing or something like that, and people can voice their concerns, and maybe it's on the back of your ballot or something, because they don't make these decisions quickly. They spend like 3+ years finding contractors. And obviously for urgent stuff, sure, you have an elected exec, you have an elected legislative body. But today, that's just not working. It's just not. And I'll actually bring up another thing that came up during the campaign. There's this one guy, he said, I love these ideas. They're so great, but my friends make fun of me and I don't know how to talk to them appropriately to explain what I mean. And one of the things they sent me was a picture of a crumbling road with a big pothole in it and like a plant growing out of it and just this terrible thing. And the words on this meme were Libertarian Road. And the first answer is, no, that's a government road. Let's start there. Let's start with that picture of that road was a government road.
I don't get it.
Yeah.
Is that supposed to be a joke?
So their thought is that if you take government out of like the process of charging people with who does these roads and handling these contracts, that all the roads will just crumble because now private people are involved, maybe even private money, and they just think that there's no possible way that we, the people, could make a good decision ourselves and use our own money instead of giving it to the tax man to have our roads repaired. So food for thought for you guys. I'd love to hear in the comments. I'm going to check the comments while we're on the break. Let me know what you guys think, and we'll be back here in a moment on Radio Free New York.
Treat you like family at Mark's Pizzeria. We'll treat you like family at Mark's Pizzeria. Great pizza, fresh and good. Simply the best in your neighborhood. Come in, we'll get to know you. Call you by name. We can bring it to you any time of the day. Mark's Pizzeria. We'll treat you like family. Mark's Pizzeria.
This is Dom Genova, owner of Genesee Valley Motors in Avon, your no-nonsense car dealer. Well, we're your no-nonsense truck dealer, too, selling Rams and Fords up to the mightiest that they make. And we have a shop with Master Techs, open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m., 6 days a week, even Saturday, so you can get your
coming back
when it's not billing hours for you. You may not be used to that. Visit RochesterWorkTrucks.com. That's RochesterWorkTrucks.com.
You're listening to Radio Free New York
on the WYSL stations.
Hey guys, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister, and what I'm doing, I'm reading through the comments that you guys are posting here on social media while you're watching the show, and I just want to say thank you guys for joining us online, and also the guys who are listening on the radio waves. There are so many comments in here that I can't even read through all of them right now, but there's a few here that I'm gonna read to you guys. One is a guy named, I think he said his name was Johnny, says that, if private companies can't do this, Johnny, I just missed your comment, so I'm going to paraphrase. Here it is. If you have a Domino's in your area and report bad roads or potholes, they may likely hire somebody to fix said bad road and or potholes. So what Johnny's talking about is Domino's was actually they hired, I think, a construction company, or they bought a truck themselves. I'm not sure what they did. They had their logo painted on the truck and sent construction crews out to start repairing roads. So for people who think that there's no ways that the roads can be repaired without government being the middleman, there's a great example right there. There's a private company not even being paid at all to manage and maintain the roads, and they're out doing it. Why are they doing it? Because they know it brings them business. They know it brings them customers. So for them, it's just marketing dollars. It's marketing dollars to repair our infrastructure and our roads. And I'm actually going to come back to that because I'm going to talk with you guys a little bit about a strategy that Larry Sharp and I discussed last year when we ran for governor and lieutenant governor, about how we could offset the ridiculous amount of tax dollars that we spend to actually have better roads. I'm going to say hi to Lorraine. She's saying greetings from Shaken Up Rochester. That's a radio show that I'm on every once in a while as a guest. So thank you for having me there, and shout out right back to you. And then Kevin brings up a really good point. Kevin says that government doesn't build the roads. It's a construction company that builds the roads. Government is there to take our tax dollars that they have already collected and use that money.
Before they use the money, first of all, they have to subtract a goodly sum for themselves.
That is the way in New York. Yes. This is some sort of percentage there, you know. But yeah,
on our side of the aisle, we call that theft.
Yes. I would absolutely.
That's what we'd be charged with if we did that.
Yeah, if we did the same thing, absolutely, we would be charged as theft. But for whatever reason, government officials get away with it all the time. It's a double standard. But the idea that we pay taxes to the government. We don't have a choice in that, though. We pay taxes to the government. They're supposed to then take those tax dollars and use that money to maintain our infrastructure and to prevent it from falling apart, which is not what's happening at all. Not at all. So that's a good point. And I want to address that. That's the process we have today that's failing. And maybe that there's a way that we could do this not involving corrupt government officials who have their hands greased all the way through the process. And we spend millions and millions and millions of dollars on our infrastructure that don't necessarily get bidded out correctly, or they go to a contractor. We've had some bid rigging charges here in New York, some kind of like insider trading stuff going on. We've got people on indictment, I think, for bribery right now locally. And we've got examples also locally of elected officials creating companies and then passing the money through to fatten their paycheck. So this is what's actually happening instead of our infrastructure being maintained. So what could we do instead? Well, I think that the Domino's example is a perfect example of what Larry Sharp and I were talking about last year, which is the idea that companies would happily pay to maintain our roads if it was good PR for them, if it was a way for them to enhance their business presence in the area, to give them a better image. Domino's is already doing it, which is amazing. And the most amazing thing about what Domino's was doing is Larry and I were actually talking about this issue before Domino's started doing it. And I don't know if somebody at Domino's heard it and was like, hey guys, we should do this, or if they came up with it totally independently. I don't know. But it was amazing midway through the election to then have something pop up and say, this could actually work. Like, private companies, without being asked, are going out and are actually repairing things at no additional cost to the taxpayer. So what might that look like? Let's just take Thruway 90 for an example, which we pay tolls for right now as well, and we're going to address that too. So imagine there was a company who wanted to adopt a portion of 90. Well, in return for them having maybe that portion of 90 named after them, maybe getting some sort of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Exposure to their potential customers. What they do, they just pay for the maintenance of the road. And by pay for the maintenance of the road, I don't mean check to the government. Now, they should write a check to the government for naming rights so we can reduce some tax burden elsewhere, very similar to how a stadium would be. But I want them to maintain the road. That is their fee for those naming rights. And I don't want this money to go through the government at all. I want, let's call it Bank of America. Let's say Bank of America, they didn't sponsor this post or anything like that, but we're just going to say Bank of America wants to have naming rights to a section of 90. We say, okay, Bank of America, it's going to be $10 million for naming rights to the local municipalities that impacts, and it is your responsibility to maintain these roads. We'd give them standards that they have to follow, otherwise they lose their naming rights. And they go out and they find the company that is going to take care of these roads. They hire the contractors directly, And what that does is that takes the corruption, the crony capitalism, the everything out of the transaction. Because you know that if Bank of America paid for a section of 90 to be fully repaired, and within a year, and say that road was guaranteed for 5 years, 10 years. In Germany, they guarantee their roads for 30 years. And they have very similar
Really?
to us. Yeah, they guarantee their roads for 30 years. And here in Rochester, New York, Monroe County, Livingston County, anywhere in New York, we're lucky to get more than 2 out of ours. Like if I were to look at roads that have been done, I would say within 2 years, it's just a mess.
Certainly not much more than 5.
Yeah.
Seems like they're always dorking around with the roads.
Yeah. Yep. So, they establish whatever their, guarantee, their warranty, whatever is, say it was 5 years, 10 years, whatever. And that year rolls around and all of a sudden those roads have to be repaired again. What would happen today is it just falls on the taxpayer. You and I, we take out, our paycheck. New York State kind of cuts off their portion, puts it in their pocket, and the contractor just gets paid again. And 9 times out of 10, it's going to be somebody's buddy who's on a board. They're trading contracts back and forth. You switch to this model, Bank of America is not going to put up with that. They're going to sue the crap out of that company, or they're going to go repair it for free. Either way, it did not cost us as the taxpayer more money. It's a much more ethical model. It takes the corruption in government clearly out of it. And it really actually gives more say to people, because now we're not focusing our tax revenue and our say and our infrastructure and everything. We're not focusing all of that on just surviving and trying to glue together our crumbling infrastructure. Now we can actually focus as citizens on the things that government should be doing, like protecting our rights, having an actual balanced budget, being small, not spending ridiculous amounts of money. Like, we can focus on those things instead of focusing on like, crap, now I've got another bent tie rod or a new wheel bearing to repair. And I guess one could make the argument that the people who would suffer out of this would maybe be the automotive industry in our area. They'd see a lot less repairs for that sort of stuff. But overall, limiting corruption in government, making government smaller, repairing our infrastructure with means of raising funds that don't include raising taxes. I really think that's the direction we need to go in this state if we want any chance of digging ourselves out of just the muck pit that we're in right now. So that's it. That's my thing on the roads there. I'm very interested in seeing what you guys might have to say about that. You've probably heard Larry and I talk about this a couple times, but I know we've got a ton of new listeners, a lot of people messaging the page, a lot of people sending me comments, people emailing into the show too. So thank you guys so much for that. We're going to take a real quick break here. And after the break, during the break, I'll read through some more comments. And we'll take a break here, and we'll be back in a moment on Radio Free New York.
You're listening to the voice of liberty.
WYSL.
AM 1040 Avon, Rochester, FM 92.1 Rochester, FM 95.5 Spencerport, and WYSL1040.com everywhere.
Avon Feed and Supply announces a new taste in local cheese. From dairies in Livingston, Genesee, and Wyoming counties, enjoy Craig's Creamery Cheese from 8 family farms made right here in Livingston County. Craig's Creamery Cheese, simply made with all natural ingredients. Choose your favorite variety exclusively in our area at Avon Feed and Supply. Bottom of the hill, West Main Street in the village of Avon. MasterCard, Visa, and Discover cards always welcome.
I'm Las from Action Towing and Service. What you can expect when you come to Action Towing and Service to get your vehicle fixed or checked out or diagnosed is the detailed description on what the vehicle requires. And you can also expect to know exactly what the plan is going forward, whether it's something that you can wait on the repair or whether it's something that needs to be repaired immediately. We make sure that you know exactly what the vehicle requires. Come down and visit us at 275 Marketplace Drive, right off of Jefferson Road.
You're listening to Radio Free New York
On the WYSL stations.
All right, guys, we are back here on Radio Free New York. Just kind of reading through the comments. I want to welcome everybody who's tuned in online. Bob, Art, Johnny, Kevin, and Michael. Just a whole bunch of people. Kurt as well. And I know there's people on YouTube and Twitter tuned in, but I can't see your guys' names. So thanks for tuning in. And of course, all our listeners who are listening to us on the radio on 1040 AM, 92.1 FM and 95.5 FM. Hey, if you guys ever decide that you want to call into the show or comment in live on the air, because we are live right now, feel free to call us. It's 585-346-3000. Once again, 585-346-3000. I love hearing you guys, love having you on the air, and love the comments on social media as well. I've got a couple people in here. They're actually commenting that they've gotten tickets because they swerve or move out of the way to avoid a pothole, and there just happens to be a cop there. And so now the government's not just not paying and not repairing the roads, but then they're collecting a little extra revenue from you as well. So I think that the system we're using is just so wrong. I think that we can make it better.
Yeah, and I had the same experience. Last week went on college tours with our 16-year-old. Was down in Pennsylvania and Ohio. And, of course, they're Rust Belt states, sure. and so on and so forth. And the roads, of course, are not to be compared with New York's. I mean, their roads, even though they're Rust Belt states, are great. Yeah. And then, once again, no cops. Yeah. You don't see any cops anywhere until you get back in New York, and now you got one pulled over every 5 miles.
Yeah.
By the way, as long as we're at this, there's a section of the Thruway in Western New York. I don't know if you've been this way, down between Buffalo and Erie, where the Thruway goes through the Indian reservation there. It's down around like Silver Creek, down in that area. Okay. South of Angola. And all of a sudden, the Thruway goes to crap. It's unbelievable. I mean, it's even worse than the roads up here. I mean, the lines haven't been painted, and there's all these really heaving sections and seams and everything else. Not only that, there's all of a sudden there's all these billboards, because remember, New York had bought all the billboard locations back in the 1980s. Yeah. But this is sovereign Indian land or whatever. And just, we've had this dispute between Andy Cuomo and the Native Americans. Sure. So this is some vindictive thing that he's doing, apparently, because there's about probably a 10-mile stretch of the Thruway that's horrible.
Wow. Yeah, I haven't been down that way in some time, but doesn't surprise me. I mean, it's hard pressed to find something that surprises me in New York nowadays.
Once again, if you'll pardon the experience, travel politics.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so Bob D, who is in the other room there, popped his head in and said, yeah, this is basically Adopt a Highway program version 2.0. And that's a great name. That's exactly what we should call the idea of allowing corporate sponsors to maintain the roads, cut the government corruption out, and keep the taxes out of it as well. I think it's the way to go. So now I'm going to move on to another thing here, which is a poll that I posted last week. We've got about 3 hours left until the poll closes, but basically I think this poll should really spur the next discussion that we should be having in politics. And as people who, I know a lot of times people who listen to this show especially probably consider themselves a little more versed in politics than the average guy. At least that's the feeling I get when people call in and comment that they're probably paying pretty good attention to politics, or they're listening to the show because they want to learn more about it. And I'm going to preface this with, sometimes you have to talk about something in somebody else's terms for them to understand. even if it's not 100% accurate. And I'm going to go into what that means in a minute. But I posted this poll about a week ago on the 25th, and it was the idea to start getting people to think about things a little differently. So I posted, hey, Cuomo, I've got an idea for you. Take the $3 billion you're going to give to Amazon and give it as tax breaks to small businesses here in New York. Or just give it back to the citizens of New York. And then I kind of threw another little jab in there, maybe it would help your approval ratings upstate, and the joke is probably nothing would help his approval ratings at this point in upstate.
And he wouldn't care anyway.
Yeah, and he really wouldn't care. So I just made a small poll attached to this. Where would you guys have Cuomo put the $3 billion? And I just put the option small local business or direct to the citizens of New York. And some people got pretty upset about this, which I didn't expect, but I should have. And that was my mistake, because immediately people came in and thought that I must be an AOC supporter somehow. And I don't know why they would think that. It was not in there at all. People got angry with me, started calling me things I'm not going to repeat on the radio. And then tried to explain to me how taxes work. And I'll give you guys a short version. For the most part, I understand how taxes work and how tax breaks work.
The same people who said MP3 players can't skip.
Yes, very, very similar. But at the same time, these people had a valid concern. And their valid concern was they felt that maybe this was misleading and that $3 billion existed, which it doesn't technically exist today, and that it could be freed up to go somewhere else. So I will give them that as a valid criticism of the post. But what I want to do is talk about the idea of talking about things in terms that people can understand. So that post was put together in such a way, and I bet you there's some people who literally heard me reading this on the radio and were thinking, that's not how it works. That $3 billion isn't here yet. And you guys are right. Like I said, you guys understand it better than the average person in New York. And why do I say that? Because Cuomo wouldn't be governor if everybody had the level of understanding you do. So I say all this to say that I want us all to take a moment, take a step back, and realize that the only way that we're going to be successful here in making change in New York is to not ostracize the people that don't understand what's going on. And what I see very, very often is the idea of, and I'm sure I'm guilty of it too. So I'm not saying that this is like me saying I'm better than you guys and this is how we need to do it. This is like a criticism that I think we should all look in the mirror and address. And it's the idea that if everybody thought the way we did, things might be different, And so sometimes we have to go back to that idea of challenging the reality, right? Which is what we talked about in the first segment, so people can think about what would be different. And the idea of putting things in really simple terms, although it wasn't 100% accurate. That $3 billion is not sitting there. In fact, we have a $2 to $3 billion deficit right now with a budget that's being proposed. And I think the most recent budget actually might have an even larger deficit. It hasn't passed yet, but I think now they're approaching the $4 billion mark. So no, we don't have $3 billion to pass around. But what we need to do is engage the average New Yorker and say, what if we didn't pick winners and losers as government? What if government wasn't choosing who could and couldn't be successful? What if instead government just wasn't taking your money? And that scares people, the idea that government doesn't take their money, because then they go, well, what about the roads? Which we addressed earlier. So what if the government wasn't taking as much of your money? What if government gave you $300 more of your taxes back? What would that do for you? How would that look? How would you feel? And basically the idea of allowing people to think based on an analogy about how things could be different. So right now, what a lot of people are kind of I'll give you guys an example. So many people probably have had or do still have cable in their home, or DirecTV, or something along those lines, and you probably pay an absurd amount of money for it each month. And probably you know that you, as a loyal customer for 20 years, somehow are paying hundreds of dollars more than the guy who just moved in next door, signed up, new fresh customer, $50 a month, and you're paying like $280. He's getting the same service as you, if not better. And you're sitting there feeling like, man, I really got shafted here. And what is your first thought? Your first thought is, well, I should leave or threaten to leave. I'm going to call and complain. I'm not a happy customer. That's what the Amazon deal is for every business in New York. You've got to think about that. That is
Kurt from Southern Tier.
We've got somebody here who's the new guy. They're getting a great deal on taxes. And yeah, maybe they're going to pay a lot of taxes. But what about us who have been here for 20-some years and we're paying just a crap ton? Now we have to leave if we want that discount. So I've got more to say about this, but it sounds like we've got Kurt on the line. So
Kurt from the Southern Tier, welcome to Radio Free New York.
Yes, sir. Nice to talk to you. Hey, free enterprise system is like a self-contained creature that tries to live. But government is like a parasite, and they literally feed off from the host. Now, in nature, some parasites kill the host. That would be socialism. Now, in our case, you're going to have graft and crony capitalism to a degree that doesn't kill the host. But we're getting to the point where it is at that point. Just thought I'd mention that.
Yeah,
that's a good point.
That's a great point. And I've got a friend who would talk about politics all the time, and he's like, you know what politics really is? And I would kind of give him this puzzled look, and he's like, well, if you break down the word, poly is many, and ticks are blood-sucking insects. So you know where I'm going with this, and but it's true. Yeah, the way things are right now, especially in New York, New York State, if you're paying taxes in New York, if you're a property owner, you're a small business owner, you're just an average guy who works and lives in New York State, somebody who's raising a family or wants to, you probably feel like New York's taking way more from you than what they're giving you. They really are.
And if you feel that way, you would be right.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And that's why people are leaving this state. People are running away as fast as they possibly can, and it's because they just can't, they can't afford it anymore. And I don't fault them for that at all. And I know you guys will hear me talk about how New York State's the front line. And if we don't fix what happens in New York and the next generation, for our grandchildren, so we're talking maybe 50 years out or so, the United States is going to look like New York State. And some people take that as me being upset with people for leaving. No, I get it. I understand why you would want to leave, and I don't fault anybody for wanting to leave. But at the same score, I still want people to fight too, because without it, we're going to be in some serious trouble.
There's no question the blue states are the vanguard, and you see what happened. I mean, the perfect example is what happened in California and Colorado. Mm-hmm. All the California types, the extreme leftists who ruined the state, started to realize that life in California wasn't much fun anymore, and it was too expensive. So then they went to Colorado, and they've resettled Colorado, where now it's happening all over again.
Yeah,
happening in the Pacific Northwest. They're trying to make it happen to Texas, and God willing, it won't.
Yeah, and in Florida, actually, and we talked about this maybe a couple of weeks ago, that Florida was seeing so many what they were calling blue state refugees. I did a whole episode on maybe Florida is going to be building a wall, I don't know, to keep New Yorkers out. And
it would be wise to do that.
Yeah, because it's starting to impact their elections. It's starting to impact their policy, and it's turning them in a direction that they weren't heading in, and that they are now worried about.
Well, of course, if AOC gets her way and all internal combustion engines, including air travel, are outlawed.
Banned. Yep.
And by the way, it's one of the important techniques in controlling a population is to limit their movement.
Yeah.
I just want to point that out to you.
Yeah.
Okay, notice how they're taking all of our roads. Don't worry, Andrew, I won't go on a rant here. They're taking all of our roads and they're adopting the traffic control technology of the 1930s, like traffic circles, because they want to slow us down. They want to make cars a less attractive option. And of course, we're going to have to plug them in and charge them and so on and so forth. But they want to keep us put. They want us to stay planted where we are.
Yeah, I don't know. The AOC is quite that. I don't want to say intelligent. That's very insulting. But I don't know that she's planned that far ahead. But I imagine some of the others probably have. Johnny actually just messaged in saying people got pretty upset with him when he shared that post that I had up as well. So it was certainly something that people got really, really upset about. And I'll give you guys an example before we take a break here, because I got a couple minutes before we take a break. I understand that the $3 billion didn't exist. And I want to explain to you guys that if we want people to engage and become interested and decide to vote, which I think is a responsibility, we can't ostracize them. We can't insult them when they don't understand the Amazon deal. We can't yell at them when they don't understand how taxes and fees work. And I'll give you an example that many people talk about doing. They say, if you're going to teach your kid about taxes, eat 30% of their ice cream. How many times have we heard that? I don't know where it came from, but I hear it all the time. Now, that's a very simple analogy that you can help a kid maybe get interested. Like, yeah, that doesn't sound good. Maybe I want to know more about that. But you know what? That's not actually technically right. Because if we were to teach kids about taxes with ice cream, it would really be a totally different animal, because what it would actually look like is, well, you take 30% of their ice cream, but that's only if they get kitty size. Then if they get a small, any scoops more than the kitty size is actually maybe 35% of their ice cream. And then if they switch to a medium, now it's 45% of anything larger than that small size. And don't forget the sprinkles. The sprinkles are taxed at a totally different percentage, and caramel's just tax-free. And then certain people in the family have to take their percentage too, depending on where you bought the ice cream. If you explained it to a child that way, they would just be overwhelmed. They'd have no idea. They just wouldn't care anymore. They'd be just like, just give me my ice cream, whatever's left, which is the state that people are in right now. So we have to be simple. We can't be so over technical that nobody gets involved, because that's where we are today. Guys, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on Radio Free New York.
Whether your new address is down the street or across the country, moving can be complicated. Make things simple with Clark Moving and Storage. Based in Rochester, New York, you can trust our expert team of professionals to pack, ship, or store your belongings safely and affordably. As a proud member of the Better Business Bureau, Clark Moving and Storage has helped thousands of customers make a seamless transition to their new home or business. Here, we believe no one customer is the same. That's why it's important to us to customize our relocation packages to meet your specific needs. Are you looking for more than a household mover? We also specialize in office relocation, transportation of high-value equipment, and logistics management. And take advantage of our Go Minis, portable storage containers. They're convenient and secure.
Locally owned and operated, we've served Western New York since 1985. For all life space,
coming back,
choose Clark Moving and Storage.
Call 585-594-5000. Visit clarkmoving.com.
You're listening to Radio Free New York
on the WYSL stations.
All right, guys, welcome back to Radio Free New York. I'm your host, Andrew Hollister. I'm scrolling through the comments. I want to welcome a few more of you to the show. I see Jared's in here, Rosemary, Aniko, I hope I'm pronouncing your name right, Valerie, and a whole bunch of other people, logging in. Thank you guys so much. And I'm going through the comments here, and there's a whole lot. So there's people talking about running for elected office, which, listen, I've done it twice now, and I'm not this year, I would do it again, and I'm not committing to anything, but I'm asking you, if you're tired of the crap in this state, or maybe it's your town, maybe it's your county, and you believe that government should be small, you believe that government should not be involved in what happens behind your closed doors, please run for office. Like, just take the leap, do it. Because I'll tell you what, competition is a good thing. All right. And I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I don't care if you're a conservative, a libertarian, Green Party, independents, whatever you are. If you subscribe to those principles and you believe that the person in office isn't subscribe to those principles and isn't carrying them out, which I would say overall is vastly true across our state, run against them. Even if you're primarying against them in your own party. Because here's why. Once you run on the platform of individual liberties, running on smaller government, cutting spending, these sort of things, guess what? To compete with you, they're going to have to be better. Maybe you win and you make amazing change. Maybe you don't win and you still make change for wherever you are. So I really want to encourage you guys, like, please get involved. It's one of the best possible ways for you to drive change here in New York. And maybe you're not the person who wants to run, but maybe you know somebody who is going to run. Maybe you support their ideals. Find a way to support them, whether it's financially, volunteering, helping them collect petitions to get their name on the ballot. Really engage, because it's not going to change all by itself. And I know a lot of people are leaving the state, and once again, I don't fault them for that, but it's not going to make New York better, those people leaving either. No,
just ask Colorado and California.
Yeah. So, Bob, you said you had an example while we were off air.
Well, yeah, I mean, you gave a great way to technique, if you will, to teach your kids about how socialism and communism, works. Where
taxes in general,
taxes in general, where the confiscatory, reallocation of wealth and so forth. So the 30% of the ice cream gets taxed away, or maybe one of your kids earns a really good grade in a class, gets an A, and then one of your other kids has a C in another class, and you say, well, we'll just take your A and make it a B, and we'll just give the B to your competing sibling. Watch the sparks fly there. Now, if you would conversely like to illustrate how the free market works, you have kid A and you have kid B, right? And you have this really nice, big, fresh baked chocolate chip cookie that just came from the bakery. Okay, this is for you guys to share. So what you do is you have kid A gets to divide the cookie. Kid B gets to pick the first piece.
Okay.
So if you impose those rules, you'll have the most evenly divided, fairest split in that cookie you've ever. Yeah. They will work on that for 20 minutes to make sure that cookie is divided right.
Yep. No, absolutely. That's a
free market, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah. No, absolutely. So. So that for those of you who are just joining, we're talking about a post that I put up on Facebook earlier last week about Amazon and how Cuomo was, and I'll just throw that post up on the live feed for those of you who might need it there. So basically, it was a post about the $3 billion in tax breaks that was going to Amazon, and technically, even that piece isn't true because at least $550 million of it was grants. So it wasn't even all tax breaks. Some of it was grant money. Others of it was a bunch of little stuff sprinkled in there. And talking about things in a way that people can understand, even if it's not 100% accurate. You can't explain everything 100% in technicality. So when you see a post like that, instead of engaging somebody, and once again, this isn't about me. Like, if people want to attack me on Facebook, whatever, I don't care. I'm happy for you guys to attack me on Facebook. It drives my engagement up. It makes my numbers look good. But it also shows me that you care. So please continue to do that. But when you see other people post about stuff like this, and they're trying to help educate people, it's perfectly fine to send them a private message just to make sure that they actually understand what they're talking about, because they might not. But what I'm seeing people do often, and this is something that just happens way too much, is people start like verbally assaulting people over the inaccuracy when it might be purposeful. And when I say purposeful, I don't mean to be deceiving. I mean to be simple, to engage people in the idea that maybe government shouldn't be redistributing my paycheck. Maybe I should be responsible for that. Maybe something like the charitable choice credit would be a really good idea. And for those who don't know what that is, I'll spend just a couple minutes explaining that. This has been going on in Arizona for I think over 10 years now. And so Larry and I, we put together this idea of, in New York State, wouldn't it be amazing if you could choose $500 of your tax money that you're paying, and you get to choose where it goes? It can go to a government agency, or it could go to a nonprofit that provides that same service as a government agency. So what does that do? It gives people the opportunity to choose something that they would pay their tax dollars for, that's important to them. You could either choose what taxpayer-funded program gets funded, or you could choose a government alternative that does the same thing in the form of a nonprofit, and you could do that once a year. So what does that mean? Let's say it's childcare, just as a very basic example, because childcare is pretty important to people, especially if you're maybe a single-parent household or something like that. You're trying to work, make ends meet. You could have the government option where you take and drop your kids off there. Let's say a show of hands, how many people want to drop their kids off for at the government? Not anybody I know. Not anybody I know. But what if there was a nonprofit that popped up and they offer that same service, and they come to you and say, hey, we're a nonprofit. We're providing childcare in the area, so that you can go to work and your child can be taken care of at, maybe some reduced rate or something like that you can afford. Would you choose this year to have your $500 go towards this nonprofit to keep it going? Well, if you're a single parent household, you may say, yeah, that's amazing. Maybe even if you're not a single parent household, maybe both of you are working full time and you don't have a friend or a family member to watch your kids while you work. You might say, yeah, that's amazing. Let me have my $500 go there. Maybe healthcare is not, or maybe childcare is not important to you. Maybe healthcare is, or something along those lines. You could basically find an organization that replaces what government does and direct up to $500 of your tax money to go there. What does that do for us? That actually gives us the idea and the opportunity to start building up organizations that provide us the same thing that government does, and actually start to make government smaller. Could you imagine, after a few years of this, some areas where the government-ran organizations don't exist anymore, because now we've naturally created a few nonprofits in the area that provide that service? Guess what that means we can do? We can start reducing government spending. And guess what? People naturally will start giving their money to the causes that are important to them. Does this mean government would go away and income taxes would go away entirely? No. I mean, I wish we could get to that point. And in New York, maybe someday we could. If you look at states like Florida, Florida has no income tax. They have no income tax, but they have.
Most states don't.
Yeah, there's a number of states. I think it's 8 states right now that have no state income tax.
I thought it was more than that.
I think a lot of them are talking about it, but I could be wrong. I'm not sure. But there's a minimum. There's 8 states that have no state income tax. Florida is the best example because a lot of people will say things like, yeah, but if you go to those other states that don't have as high taxes, you get worse service. Well, Florida has more people than we do, so they have higher population. They have no state income tax, and they have half the budget we do. Half. Now,
wow, we're both wrong. It's 7.
7. Oh, okay.
Alaska, Florida, Nevada, South Dakota, Texas, Washington, and Wyoming.
There you go. There you go.
So, oh, yes, and residents of New Hampshire and Tennessee are also spared from handing over an extra chunk of their paycheck, but they do pay tax on dividends and income from investments.
Oh, so, interesting. Okay, so kind of like
depending on how you look at it, 7 or 9.
Yeah, yeah. So Florida has more people. half the budget, no state income tax. Now, inevitably, somebody listening right now is thinking, yeah, but they don't have snow like we do. They don't have to salt the roads. You're right. But you know what they have that we don't have? Hurricanes. So their roads get totally wiped out. You know, they don't even have the chance for potholes. They have to lay a whole new road, new buildings. They still have half the budget we do with no state income tax. So it's totally possible for government to spend less. And then I'll get to the next point. The services. People say, yeah, but we expect a certain level of services. Why is everybody leaving New York and moving to Florida then? If the services were that big of a deal, people wouldn't be up and leaving New York State and moving to Florida. So it's totally possible. It's totally doable. We got to do it. I don't know. Otherwise, people are just going to keep leaving the state 100%. Day in, day out, we've lost over 1 million since Cuomo took office. It's a lot.
By the way, there's also a trick involved in these states that have no state income taxes. It turns out, apparently, localities in those states can impose sales taxes, and they do.
Oh, yeah. But you know what? We have sales tax here, too.
Yeah,
though.
not localities, though.
Well, we have, so a lot of people don't know, our state income or our state sales tax is only 4%. And then the county gets to impose up to 4.5%.
Those sales taxes in those states, by the way, are high.
Yeah, some of them are. I think the highest I've seen is 11%, though. So it's not, not as high. But yeah, I'll give you that for sure. Guys, thank you so much for joining us here on Radio Free New York. I will catch you guys on Friday, same time, 1 p.m.
Pick the perfect pre-owned at Patrick.